The John Lebang Show has been known to make people laugh, sing, think, scream, throw things in rage, and generally lose their minds. Listener discretion is advised. All right, ladies and gentlemen, as we continue to bring you broadcasting excellence, we're in another installment of Rock'n'Roll Unravelled with our good friend, Derek Shelmerdine. He's got lots of great information about some classic rock bands. Derek, welcome back.
I mean, the Beatles themselves, wow. The June-July period for them was absolutely amazing. I mean, back in 57, on the 6th of July, was when it all started. John Lennon actually met Paul McCartney. Paul came along to one of John's gigs in Wilton. And that's a very genteel affair where all the local church-going people will have a fair, basically, and bring tea and cakes. But it started the biggest rock and roll band in the history of the world. And then by the time we get to 1966, 20th of June, released in America that album called Yesterday and Today. And it was originally released with the notorious Butcher cover, which had the Beatles sitting down in white butcher outfits, raw meat, and decapitated and dismembered dolls. Now, the record-buying public and the retailers took a dim view of this, and Capitol withdrew it and had a new cover, which is called the trunk cover, which is simply a big travel case.
Is there a story behind the morbid cover?
No, it was just decided that they wanted something a little more standoutish, so they went for this quite way out cover, and it didn't go down at all well with fans or retailers. When they withdrew the album, they didn't actually put a new cover on it. They just had a sticky cover of the new front cover that they pasted on. So with the early ones that were withdrawn, reissued with the original cover and the stick on, you could actually peel off the trunk cover to reveal the butcher cover. There's some interesting values on all the combinations of sleeves for Yesterday and Today.
That gives it a little bit of a novelty.
And a lot of people tore it off. People damaged covers. So it's one of the weirdest sort of collectibles that the Beatles have got. By the time we get, well, about the same time, actually, 24th of June 1966, they actually set off on their final world tour. And took in Germany, Japan, Philippines, and the USA. Well, it was quite disastrous, really. They played Hamburg for the last time. In Japan, they played the Budokan, which is the spiritual home of the martial arts. And a lot of Japanese took a dim view, and they were receiving death threats. When they went on to the Philippines, Imelda Marcos invited them around for tea, and Brian Epstein politely refused. They had to get away, and Imelda Marcos took a very dim view of this, and they had to have police protection to get them back to the airport. And the American tour was even more disastrous. This was where, just before they arrived, Date Book magazine, a sort of girl teen magazine, reprinted part of John Lennon's interview that he did with the London Evening newspaper. And this was his More Popular Than Jesus. What he actually said was, Christianity will go, it will vanish and shrink. I needn't argue about that. I'm right and I will be proved right. We're more popular than Jesus now. I don't know which will go first, rock and roll or Christianity. Jesus was all right, but his disciples were thick and ordinary. It's them twisting it that ruins it for me. That's what he actually said, and interesting enough, it caused no feedback whatsoever in the UK. But when that was published in America, there was a wide outcry. DJs were organising pub burnings of Beatles books and albums. The Ku Klux Klan picketed gigs. They received lots of death threats, and they actually feared they'd be shot on stage. All in all, it was quite a reaction. But that was when they decided to end touring. I mean, this is sort of around before they got into the Pepper. And the recordings were getting far more complicated and would have been hard to do on stage. They were losing interest in touring as well because they themselves. And I think all this culminated in them deciding to become a studio band.
And thank God they became a studio band on many levels, because some of the best music they produced was during that time period.
Oh, absolutely. that was when they really came into their own as songwriters. I mean, we couldn't do a June issue of the show without mentioning the fact that Sgt. Pepper was released 50 years ago to the day on the 1st of June in the UK and the 2nd of June in America.
And that has Strawberry Fields on it, and that has an interesting story behind the recording of that song.
That's right. That was one of the first songs. Strawberry Fields and Penny Lane were the first to be recorded, and the record company was very keen to get a single from the Beatles. They needed to put one out, so they took those instead of them going on the album. They went on a double A side single. And it proved a disaster because in the UK, that was the first single that missed number one spots. They'd had 11 consecutive number ones up until then, but they released that as a double A side, and it missed the number one slot because they would have had 8 consecutive number ones in the UK if that had been a number one.
So they probably would have been better off just having the single A side with a B side song versus the double A side.
Absolutely, and the worst of it was that because they'd issued as a single, they wouldn't onto Sgt. Pepper album. So what was potentially one of the or two of the strongest songs on the album never made it to the final cut. But the album itself is interesting because there are lots of clues apparently for lovers of conspiracy theories about for the Paul is dead theory. One of them on the clue on the cover is that Paul's the only one with his back to the camera and his head is in line with the lyrics of Without You. So it's an interesting album all round that.
And they played that up because they took that onto Abbey Road as well, where he walked across the street barefoot. So they kept playing that up.
That's right.
Yep.
And if you look at the cover of Abbey Road, there's I think it's a VW parked there, and it's a registration 28 if, and that would have been Paul McCartney's age if he was alive. But I mean, there are a whole bunch of things on the Sgt. Pepper cover and in the songs. There's a reference to after the original introduction, as it goes into Little Help for My Friends, it says, to introduce to you Billy Shears and the Incredible Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Heart Club Band, and it was thought that the Billy Shears was the replacement Paul McCartney. He's actually on tour and can be seen in both the USA and Brazil across the 7th of July until the 20th of October, and Ringo's also on tour later in the year, in November, just across the USA, and his band includes Todd Rundgren, so that should be a good gig.
Right, he puts together an all-star band and just goes on tour every once in a while, and it's a great time.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that would be, well, they'd both be great bands to see.
Yeah, Paul McCartney, when I saw him play the Super Bowl, and that's the one of the most impressive Super Bowl shows I've ever seen. He was just awesome on that show. So, yeah, if you got a chance to go see Paul McCartney, you really should take the opportunity.
Never actually seen him. I'd love to catch him somewhere.
And with how the musicians of that time period are slowly fading away, you got to take that opportunity when you have it. So you got Lynyrd Skynyrd up next, eh?
That's right. I mean, they were in the recording studio on the 30th of June 1971, cutting material that was supposed to be on their first album, and they cut a lot older stuff through into 1972, but it was never really deemed strong enough to go onto an album. And their first album didn't actually arrive till August 1973, pronounced Lynyrd Skynyrd. But what happened was that the material got released as a result, basically, of the sad loss with the plane crash in October 77, when Ronnie Van Zant, Steve Gaines, and his sister Cassie were killed in the plane crash. And 1978, they released the material from those 71-72 sessions as the album Skynyrd's First and Last. But on the 24th of June 1970, they released a classic, Sweet Home Alabama. And that was record or written as a reply to a couple of Neil Young songs where he'd been a bit of a pop at the States with his song Southern Man on After the Gold Rush and Alabama itself on Harvest.
So you're always full of information, Derek.
And well, we do our best. But the Skynyrd are on a very big tour at the moment. I mean, they're really beaving away. They're touring, or their tour is in America at the moment, and it goes on to Argentina, Chile, Brazil, and finishes off in Jamaica the 22nd of January next year. So that's really active for them. And they've still got original member Gary Rossington, the guitarist.
Yeah, and pretty much that there's only one member left in the whole band, right? Original member?
That's right. Yeah, one way or another, people have mostly shuffled off this mortal coil, as they say, either in car crashes or plane crashes.
Incredible.
But they're still a great band.
Now we got the Monkees, huh? Those Monkees.
Yeah. One of the great highlights of June 1967 was Monterey Festival. It wasn't technically the first pop festival to be held, but it was certainly the most famous from that time. And it was co-organised by John Phillips of the Mamas and the Papas. The Who and Jimi Hendrix were both on, and neither wanted to follow the other. And they settled on who would go on the toss of a coin. And the Who went on first. Grateful Dead refused to allow their set to be used on the movie of the event.
Really?
And Janis Joplin, early days with Big Brother and the Holding Company, she was so impressed everybody that she was invited back the following day and repeated the set. Also on the menu that day, as it were, was Mike Bloomfield's new band, Flag. They played their debut gig there. But what was great about Monterey was that the Monkees were in the audience, and they saw Hendrix and thought, oh, he's pretty good, and invited him to support them on their US tour, because Jimi Hendrix had only just got off the ground, basically. And I'm not sure if this is first, but it was certainly, I think it probably was his first appearance in America. So invited to join the Monkees, who were massive at this particular time, as an act. And there's a great urban myth that, I mean, Jimi Hendrix didn't stay with the Monkees tour very long, and the great urban myth was that the right-wing of the American Revolution, rather conservative set of ladies, petitioned the promoter to pull Jimi Hendrix off the tour. But the reality is that Jimi Hendrix was getting a little bit bored of playing his entire set to 10 and 12, 11-year-old girls all chanting, "We want the Monkees, Monkees," right through his set, that he decided that he'd quite like to move on and do something else. And there was an Australian journalist called Lynyrd Skynyrd with the tour, and she actually devised this myth about the Daughters of the American Revolution. I thought that was a great story.
Definitely. And yeah, I can see why Jimmy wouldn't want to be playing in front of those crowds because of the I mean, the Monkees were a completely different style than Jimmy.
And their audience was completely different. I mean, the Monkees' audience was the early days of teeny boppers with 10, 12, 13-year-old girls making up the audience. It's actually Happy Birthday, 9th of July, 1947, to Mitch Mitchell, who was the drummer with Jimi Hendrix. And he was also with the Riot Squad and Georgie Fame before that. A couple of great bands to look up if anybody's looking for some of the kind of music that Mitch Mitchell was playing before he joined Jimi Hendrix. But the Monkees tour, that really pretty extensive across the USA, Canada, then back to the USA, and then he goes off to New Zealand and Australia. They're doing that from the 11th of August to the 16th of December. It's actually a two-monkey tour. It's Mickey Dolenz and Peter Tork. I believe Davy Jones died in 2012. But since the Monkees actually finished, I mean, their TV show the first show aired on the 12th of September 6, and the last show was the 25th of March 1968. So this tour is billed as their 50th anniversary tour. Interesting.
I used to watch that TV show when I was a little kid, the reruns of it. I remember watching all that stuff. Daydream Believer. It was really interesting how they had a story, and then they would incorporate their songs in the story. It was really cool. It was. I think they took the idea from Elvis movies or something.
Very similar kind of feel. Absolutely. And the Beatles did some cartoon TV as well around this sort of time.
Yep, I remember watching
the same kind of thing. Yeah. But Pink Floyd, to move on to a slightly different area of the rock and roll world, I mean, Pink Floyd had a very interesting time around June and July over the years. In 1968, the 29th of June, they released Saucer Full of Secrets, second album, and that actually featured both David Gilmour and Syd Barrett, who was the original. Well, he was the leader, very much the leader and guardian light of the band. He wrote most of them and he was the lead guitarist. But sadly, he got a little bit too far down the mind-bending drugs road, and he eventually went off into seclusion in his home town of Cambridge. In fact, the last contact they had with Syd Barrett, spookily enough, was on the 5th of June 1975 at Abbey Road Studios, when they were recording Shine On You Crazy Diamond, which was actually about Syd Barrett. And when he walked into the studio, nobody actually recognized him. His hair, he put on a lot of weight, and he was just nothing like the guy they remembered. And sadly, that's the last time I saw it. But interestingly, on the 6th of July 1977, the Pink Floyd were playing a gig at Olympic Stadium, Montreal, and it was a really raucous gig. The fans were letting off firecrackers and making a lot of noise. And Roger Waters really was not happy with the way the whole thing was going. And there was one fan who got a little bit too close on some of the netting, and he spat at him famously. And it was that time that he got the idea for the wall. How he enjoyed performing, but he hated the audience. And he thought, what a great idea if we could build a wall between the audience and the band. And that was where about 1979, a couple of years later, the Wall album appeared. And it all sort of stemmed from that gig. I mean, to be fair, David Gilmour wasn't happy either. And he didn't return for the regular encore where they do a sort of blues jam. And Snowy White was in the surrogate band in the Wall, and he handled the encore guitar solo. So that must have been quite a concert to have been at.
Yeah, incredible.
The last concert Roger Waters performed with the Floyd was on the 17th of June 1981 at Earl's Court in London, where they were performing the Wall, because they never actually toured with their last album. The Wall was the last tour that they actually did, but they did get together once more. Pigs Did Fly. Pink Floyd and Roger Waters reunited for the G8 concerts on 2nd of July 2005. I mean, they did about a 20-minute set, which was pretty damn good. And it was also Rick Wright's birthday on the 28th of 1943. And he was there right from the very beginning. Interestingly, before they were called the Pink Floyd, they were called things like Sigma Sick and the Abdabs. And the Abdabs had various variations. They were called at times the Screaming Abdabs, and they all met at College. And one band names they used was the Architectural Abdabs, which I think is one of the greatest names that's ever graced the halls of rock.
No, that's
Roger
a great
Waters
name.
has got a new album out at the moment, just out.
Oh, really? He's an excellent artist solo-wise as well. He's had just a great career. Not a lot of people have heard his solo stuff, but, I mean, if they spent the time and just listened to it. I believe he did an album called The Hitchhiker, which was great, too. But he's got a new album out, eh?
That's right. Yeah, that Hitchhiker Guide was a great album. And he also released, his last album was Amused to Death. Great album. But that was 10 years ago. This is called Us and Them, which is actually a track on Dark Side of the Moon. So there might well be some relevance to that. And as well as some off the new album, he's apparently doing songs from Dark Side of the Moon, Animals, Wish You Were Here on the Wall. So that should be a really good, mostly the USA, and some gigs in Canada from the 27th of June to the 29th of October.
And they're going to be touring the United States and Canada.
That's right. Most of those gigs are in the United States.
Well, I'm going to have to see if they're playing around here, because I would love to see that. You want to come out? We'll go watch it. We'll go watch a show here in Detroit. Come on out.
That'd be brilliant. We'll have to do that one of these days. You can get all these actual venues and dates are available through the link onto the website. So anybody looking for the dates and the venues, the links are all to the official tour sites. They're not to ticket sites as such. I'll just say one little fact about Dark Side of the Moon was it's been 730 consecutive weeks.
Yeah, once it got there, it hasn't come off.
That's right.
That's an amazing. I mean, just that in itself tells you how great Pink Floyd actually is.
No, I was just going to say they really were one of the trailblazers of moving rock to a whole new level.
Yeah, but their recording quality was ahead of the game. Every album was like new and interesting, and the sound quality was way better than their competitors, or their peers is probably more like it.
Absolutely. I mean, quadraphonic music really was designed to listen to their music. They were actually one of the pioneers of quad. I think it was something like the absinthe coordinator at one of their gigs. And what it was essentially a joystick that's linked between. They had the four corners of the auditorium, and they had this joystick that enabled the front desk sound guy to actually manipulate the sound across the various speakers.
Sound video games.
Yeah, exactly.
No, that's awesome. That's a great little tidbit there. Well, Derek, we're running up against the clock. Why don't you give everybody your contact information, the websites, your Twitter and everything, so they can follow you?
Oh, it's brilliant. Yeah, this and lots of other information on the website, which Rock'n'Roll Unravelled.com. And I do a lot of Twittering, and that's at RNR Unravelled, and Facebook, and it's all about rock and roll stuff, which is, the Facebook is at Rock and Roll Unravelled.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for joining us again, and we'll see you next month, I'm sure, and you'll have more interesting stories, tidbits, and who's on tour. That's just great. Thank you, Derek, for joining us again.
Thanks a lot, John. Really enjoyed it.
If you want to contact the John Lebang Show, feel free to send an email to jlebang@live.com. And if you're on Twitter, look him up at John Lebang. And don't forget to go to his Facebook page at The John Lebang Show.